ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode. Kuda Biza here. In today's episode, I'm going to be joined by an amazing entrepreneur, and she's doing some awesome things, really in the food space. And the idea of really creating products that really help not just the consumer when you're eating it, but also you're looking into your supply chain. So things like the type of farmers that you work with. It's something that she and her brand really focus on. So I'm going to bring Joni on, and she's going to share a little bit about her brand and her story, but really think about it from a perspective of how the brand is really supporting mission-based type of initiatives. So working with regenerative farmers and making sure that the supply chain process is tightened up. But also making sure that the products that they provide you are the best of the best. So think of gluten-free and vegan type of ingredients. So with that, let me bring Joni onto the platform. How are you doing, Joni?
I'm really good. Thanks for having me, Kuda.
Great. Where are you in the world today?
I'm in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, which is a small part of northern Idaho. We're pretty close to Canada.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So you cross the border a lot?
Not as often as you'd think, especially recently. So we're waiting for a little bit more border flexibility to come our way soon, because there's a lot of amazing country just over the border in Canada. So
that's amazing. And that part of the world, agriculture is quite big. And
yes, it is.
I've read something about the potatoes in Idaho being like the best in the world. Is that true?
Yeah, it is. I mean, Idaho is definitely known for its potatoes, but we also have a huge just agricultural footprint in lots of things, ranging from grains, like the typical culprits like wheat and barley, but also a ton of bean production and hops and all kinds of cool agricultural goods and specialty crops like wine, grapes, and berries and stuff too. Cool. And we're pretty lucky where we live because we have Washington right here as well. So I work a ton with Washington and Oregon farmers as well.
Wow, that's pretty interesting. So Snacktivist Foods, I like the name. It's kind of like, for me, a tongue tire. Like I was trying to say it earlier, it's like Snacktivist.
Yeah.
But it's a really nice name, and I think it speaks to what you stand for. So would you mind sharing a little bit about the vision and why you decided to come up with this brand?
Yeah, so early on, my personal background actually is I was a scientist with a focus on botany and plant chemistry, and then I became an RN. So I spent many years as an ICU nurse and an ER nurse and working with diabetic education. And time and time again, the lessons through all of that always came down to the fact that food is medicine. And that food can be a really powerful connector, like from community connectedness to, connectedness with nature. And I felt like we needed to put more activism into eating, and actually being an activist for what your food is and how it impacts other people and how it impacts the planet. And so I was a full-time nurse when I started with 3 kids at home. So it was kind of a slow organic growth because we didn't have a ton of resources, time or money, and, just very busy. But we wanted to start a snack line at first. So Snacktivist made perfect sense. We were like, oh, snack activist. But as it turns out, we ended up launching a line of baking mixes because for other entrepreneurs, you go to get started and you have limited money. You can't usually just put a really fancy finished product out first iteration. So we decided to start with what we could do and reach out to our local partners. And we're actually still selling that line, but we're getting ready to launch into new avenues as well. So snacks included.
And then when was this when you started?
Oh, this was back in like 2016.
Okay.
Yeah. So it's been a while now. My kids are much older now and things have changed. And I actually stepped aside from nursing full time a couple of years ago to really commit to the company and scale the company.
That's awesome. So you started in 2016 and now it's 4 or 5 years later. And what are some of the ups and downs you've seen as an entrepreneur, and how have you navigated through some of these ups and downs?
Well, it's been quite a roller coaster, I have to say. It's interesting how nothing seems to go quite as smoothly or as quickly as you think. Some days I'm like, is this just me? And then I talk to other entrepreneurs and I frequently hear the same stories. So, as time has gone by, but now we're hitting that point where things are really taking off like crazy, and it's the narratives coming together as well. I think when we first started, we were really focused on, hey, we make these great ancient grain products that are good for you and good for the planet and gluten-free, vegan, etc. And people were like, oh, cool, gluten-free, that's great. But now there's this shift, I think, everywhere globally, where people are really starting to think about how humans interact with the climate, if we can do something positive to affect climate change. And regardless, how are we going to feed our planet, 9 billion people into the future? So that's really helped as well.
Wow.
People are
So,
waking up.
yeah. So, it's an interesting dynamic because, you look into kind of like some of the things happening with, climate change, and hunger is a big issue. It's one of
Yeah.
the core issues I focus on as an entrepreneur through my cookie brand, and Unbelievable. Now, from where you sit, right, what would you recommend consumers do, or like maybe align themselves with, in order for us to make sure that some of the challenges that the world is facing, like let's say climate change and all these other things, and even just kind of like health, right? Some of the food that we eat
Yeah.
are a big contributing factor to some of the chronic, illnesses that people face. So what advice or tips could you give in terms of consumer brand alignment,
Sure.
so that some of the consumers watching and listening can at least have additional insights to consider when they're purchasing products in the grocery store?
Yeah, that's actually a huge topic that I've given a lot of thought to over the years. And I think ultimately, at the end of the day, like Americans, I think globally, everybody's susceptible to this heavy duty marketing and messaging that gets pumped out by the food system. But I feel like in the United States, it's extra strong. And so many people get caught up into fad diets, and there's like a whole lot of shaming or a whole lot of like kind of fear mongering that goes through all of that marketing. And so much of it is focused on weight loss and those kind of topics as well, which is a big deal. I mean, especially in a country where diet related diseases and obesity related diseases are like the number one killer of Americans. So there's all these different things flying around. It's tough to know where to focus. And I know for me personally, and for my family personally, one of the number one things that now I'm focused on is water, and how what we're eating is it water. Does it contribute to efficiency with water? Because a lot of these crops that we hear about every day, like I love avocados. I personally love avocados, but when I read about the like how avocados get to our plate and the human rights violations that happen overseas for water rights, that they are actually displacing and removing indigenous people from their land because of water rights to grow avocados, so we can all have avocados every day in our keto diets, so that really disturbs me. I find that very, very disheartening. And I feel like we have a tremendous potential in our own backyard right here in North America, where about 40% of our arable lands in our nation are suitable for growing grains. And a lot of those grains are used to feed livestock. And they're like really poor quality grains. They're grown with a lot of chemical inputs, and they're grown with a kind of a disregard to water use. And water is going to be the most scarce resource of all moving into the future. And so we're really dedicated on what can we eat, and that's going to be water, sensitive to the water needs in the future of our grandchildren and our children, not draining the aquifers unnecessarily, and also have a better quality food value to them. And that's how we landed on ancient grains. So, like GMO corn require a lot of spray, a lot of pesticides, a lot of water. And, a lot of it's fed to animals or going into ethanol, but a lot of humans eat a lot of it as well. And we think that there are other alternative crops that would be better for us and better for the planet. So we're actively working to change that.
So what are some of those alternatives?
Yeah, so where corn is grown, we frequently look at sorghum, which is a native crop of Africa. It's like the heart of African cuisine in many parts of the continent, and also used throughout India, Asia. And the history of sorghums is very dynamic and deep, and they're a beautiful food. And they are grown using literally a small percentage of the water requirements that corn needs. They have
Yep.
deeper root systems. They play well with intercropping with other crops. They don't need as many inputs, chemical inputs, so fewer fertilizers, fewer pesticides. So we think sorghum is a huge part of how we feed the world and solve some of our biggest global food needs.
Wow, that's interesting. I'll definitely look into that. I was born in Africa too, and I'm quite familiar with sorghum.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
it's always happy and a good place when you hear someone else talking about
Yeah,
some of your staple foods too. So
yeah. It's an
anyway,
amazing.
back to your brand. So you started off digitally native on Shopify and Amazon, and now
Mhm.
you're starting to expand into other channels like food service and
Yeah.
retail. How has that journey been for you as an entrepreneur? To start off, digital and now starting to scale into other channels.
Yeah, well, it's definitely a lot more complicated when you start working through distributors. So I think for me, I found it really intimidating to begin with. And we were kind of scared to really go there because,
Mhm.
as most people know, when you start working with the big distributors, there's a potential for a huge win, but there's also potential for a huge loss that could be financially catastrophic to your company.
Yep.
And so we kind of refused to even explore working with bigger distribution partners until I had a team that had expertise in that. And
Hmm.
for so many entrepreneurs, building that team and having really qualified, meaningful relationships on your team is difficult to build. Like, it takes time to make that happen. And I know for us, I live in a very small community. There aren't a lot of those people running around like if I were in a huge urban area. But once I felt like I had a team together that could skillfully negotiate contracts, skillfully execute on these kind of things, I was really reluctant to grow until we had that in place. And I'm glad that I was hesitant because I think it would have gotten us into a lot of trouble.
So, is it fair to say that maybe the tip you're sharing with the audience right now is you want to dream big but start small and then scale fast,
Yeah.
where you really just want to make sure that you control your growth because sometimes too rapid of growth can actually hurt you.
Yeah, you can grow broke very easily. It's like you grow yourself into cash scarcity. And I
Hmm.
can see now, even at a smaller level of commerce, how that can happen very easily. And so I feel much more confident now as we're growing more aggressively because I have team members who are really sophisticated with their financial projections and understanding cash flow needs. And they can say, wait, I know you're excited about this contract, but let's try to drag our feet for 6 months because we need to fix that cash flow hole. In order to do it, you need to go raise money, and here's exactly how much, and here's what it's going to go for. And that's just an important part of the process that I don't think most people understand, that CPG costs a lot of money. And if you don't come from a background where you have a ton of personal savings to invest, or maybe you've got family members or friends who have a lot of capital to invest in you,
The rich uncle.
if you don't have a rich uncle, you're going to have to spend a lot of time to make friends with people who will trust you as a first
Mhm.
time founder to give you the money you need to grow. So, and that
Yeah,
takes time.
that's really interesting. So with me, it was kind of like the same. Like when I started my second business here in the States, I started my first business when I was in Africa.
Mhm.
It was bootstrapping,
Yeah.
and I actually had to leverage my suppliers as kind of like my investors because I worked
Yeah.
out really good flexible payment terms with them. But that was
Yes.
what actually enabled me to get into market because if you get
So smart.
45, 60-day payment terms, now
Yeah.
you can get inventory, sell it within that period, and then pay
Yeah.
them, and then just kind of like build your business that way. So
I'm so glad you
sometimes.
brought that up. So, yes, so true, so spot on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So sometimes you need to be very creative. And one key
Mhm.
thing, though, that I would like the listeners to really take into consideration is that, a lot of times you have these ideas, but you don't have the resources to fund the dreams and aspirations that you have.
Yeah.
However, if you are resourceful, right? Not
Mhm.
focusing on the resources, but if you're resourceful, there
Sure.
could be ways in which your dreams can still come true. It might not be as fast or as quick as you'd want it to,
Yep.
but there's a way for you to get there. And here I just shared with you like one simple trick of how you could leverage a supplier to kind of like
Mhm.
finance your endeavor without having
Yeah.
to give out any equity, right? Because
Yes.
they're
Yep.
just providing you the product and you pay them in 30 or 45 days,
Mhm.
and then your focus is to try to sell it
Mhm.
profitably so that
Yeah.
at least you keep the profit, you pay them off, and you just continue growing
Turn
the
the
business.
engine. Yeah,
Exactly.
no, that's such good advice. And there's so many cool little hacks like that that can help you become cash conservative. And there are scrappy little tricks that you either learn through trial and error, which can be kind of disastrous sometimes, or like you watch podcasts like this and you're like, oh, Kuda, that's a great idea. I never even thought about that. I'm gonna try doing that in the future. So I think that, surrounding yourself by entrepreneurs, either in person or digitally like this, like, there's so many amazing podcasts and even electronic communities out there that are developing where like listservs and whatnot, where you can start to get to know and develop really great relationships with people who have been down the same path as you. And you can learn so much that way. It's amazing.
Cool. So we're going to go to your website real quick, and
Okay.
we're going to talk about some of your offerings because I was there earlier.
Hmm.
And folks, her website is snacktivistfoods.com.
Hmm.
And take a look at some of these flavors like
Yeah.
rosemary, garlic. How do you even pronounce this?
Focaccia. And what's fun, Kuda, I think you'll appreciate is that focaccia mix is actually made out of sorghum flour. It's the first
Oh,
ingredient. So
really?
it's really kind of like global fusion concept because we're taking a ancient grain from Africa and we're making like a Italian inspired bread out of it. And so like there's just a lot of fun things like that going on. And my apologies, I do need to update my website here pretty soon. We're planning to do that next quarter. So but you can learn about the flavors that we have, like our ivory teff, another amazing ancient grain from Africa, from East Africa, very
Mm,
drought resistant. That's a fun story because all of our teff right now that we put into that ivory teff pancake and waffle mix is
mhm.
grown here in Idaho.
Oh, wow.
Interestingly enough, yeah, we have a group of Idaho farmers that realized they were over in Africa doing some agricultural work and some information exchange. And they said, you know what? This was in the 70s. They're like, I bet teff would grow really well in southern Idaho where it's very dry and mountainous. And sure enough, it did. And now we're taking it one more step because teff is so drought tolerant. Our farmers and our processors who work with the teff are now reaching out to farmers along the Colorado River and in other regions that are have been decimated by irrigation rights being restricted or eliminated, and they've had to cut down orchards. They've had to let their fields go fallow, and that's how we end up with desertification. That's how we create deserts out of fertile lands, as we just
Mm,
abandon them. And the teff guys are going in there and they're like, hey, I bet if we could plant this in the spring, even if you could get a trickle of irrigation or the right kind of rain early on in the season, this will withstand the hot summers that we're getting now, especially
mhm.
in areas like California, Arizona, Nevada. And what do you know, even with like a month of over 105-degree temperatures, no rain at all, they're still getting beautiful yields. And there's a potential to take these lands that have been at risk of turning into deserts and keep them producing food to feed the world, which is a
Cool.
really powerful notion.
And let's talk about this plant-based protein pancake and waffle mix. It
Yeah.
sounds really interesting to me. And,
Yeah, that's
who
a good
doesn't
one.
want a delicious pancake in the morning?
Yeah, and that's a fun one. We've used a pea protein
Hmm.
that's coming from sustainably grown legumes. We're actually playing around with that. We might turn it into a blend of proteins here soon. But it's, you're getting, I think it's 14 grams of protein for one pancake, or which is actually a pretty formidable amount of protein. If you're a vegan and you're trying to get more protein and you're not using animal sources, it can be a little bit difficult to find those real concentrated protein sources. So we have people that love this product so much they buy 5-pound bags of it. And if
Hmm.
we're at home and they know if they make a pancake or a waffle for their child and put some peanut butter or almond butter or something on it, they're like, wow, they've gotten a huge amount of their protein just at breakfast. they don't have to worry so much the rest of the day. It's pretty
Wow.
cool. Yeah.
That's really interesting.
And it's just add water and oil. All of our products are just add water and oil. So you don't need to have any complicated things at home to assemble them.
That's interesting. And I think for a guy like me, easy is my language. That's like my love language in the kitchen. So
yeah, you're not alone, Kuda. You're not alone.
Yeah. So if it's something easy to make, I'm down for it. And I think it's something that I actually definitely do want to try because I'm going for a more plant-based diet. I'm not officially vegan, but if you look into a lot of the things that I eat, you know, I don't eat red meat anymore. You know, it's chicken here and there, but I'm trying to be more plant-based in my eating. So the falafel mix was also quite interesting as well because I eat a lot of the Mediterranean diet mainly because of that. So anyway, to close it out, I just wanted to find out, you know, what would you say to, you know, a listener who is kind of like on the edge in, you know, moving forward and taking a risk and starting their business, but you know, they know that, you know, this is what they were born to do. So any words of wisdom you'd like to share?
Yeah, definitely. I think the most important thing is just to make sure you get out and talk to your customers. So, you know, doing those farmers markets, even going to a local little store that would allow you, now that COVID's over, to set up a table and give away samples. Even if you're not on the shelf there, it's invaluable experience because you talk to the people who would potentially be your customers and your bread and butter per se. And if it's not quite the right fit, they're going to tell you. If they're like, I love this product, but it's a little too expensive, or I love this product, but it's not quite sweet enough, or I love this product, but the bag's too big. I'd never go through that in one sitting. And you're going, and before you put a bunch of money into producing a bunch of product that's not quite right, you can tease out those details early on. So I'm really glad that we did that early on. Our consumers really led our product development pathway. We had 2 products to start, and we just went out and we were in stores. We couldn't do the markets in our area, but we could do the stores. And that's how we ended up with every other product in our lineup. Was it came from our customers. They said, hey, look, my kids have issues and they want chocolate chip cookies, and it needs to be vegan, gluten-free, but simple to make. And so we did it. We made a really amazing cookie mix. And then the parents were so happy because they're like, oh, good, we're getting whole grain flours in the cookies. And it's still a cookie. It's got sugar. You wouldn't want to eat them tons every day because it's a treat. But you know, then we get these notes from these parents that are like, oh my gosh, you guys have actually made my life easier, because now, you know, my child or myself, you know, it solved a very powerful problem for them at home when it has to do with feeding their families.
That's amazing. So I think you've heard it, right? You want to go out there, apply some of your social listening skills in order for the customer to really lead and guide the product development process. Because sometimes we might think that our product idea is the best idea in the world, but at the end of the day, customer is king, and we're always developing and creating products to serve the needs for the customer. So make sure that you clearly understand the customer pain points and solve for that, because any successful entrepreneur, what they've been able to do is understand the pain points and solve the pain points, and then you're a winner there. So
we're doing it for them.
So thank you so much, Joni, for spending some time with me. And
it's been great.
And giving us some tips on how we can start a business.
I love it. And if anybody ever has any questions, feel free to reach out to me. I'm available on Instagram or LinkedIn. I'm always happy to share what I've learned through the ups and downs and bruises and joys of entrepreneurship. So
And in the description below, we'll have the link to her website, the one that we're sharing, as well as Instagram and her LinkedIn. So just click the description below and you'll be able to get in touch with Joni.
Yeah, so much fun. It's so great talking to you, Kuda. You're just a joy to talk to. We could talk all day. So
you know, now you've got me interested in coming out to Idaho. So
you should. It's so beautiful.
And say like, hey, let's hang out and we cross the Canadian border and see what we do out there.
Oh, that'd be great. Anytime.
Great.
Excellent. Thanks so much.